Hello and welcome to episode 140 of the Player 3 podcast. I'm your host, Luke Croft. Alongside me, the always visually stunning Larry Hunt.
Hi.
Today we have a great show lined up for you. As expected, developers are racing to develop their own Battle Royale modes, leaving in its wake a long-standing tradition of a popular franchise. The director of God of War provides us with an important reminder about game developers, and a studio is suing a media outlet over reports of a toxic work environment. Larry, we're going to get to all that later on in this episode.
And more. We also
was
have
that a
our
good
own
teaser?
mics again.
Yeah, we do have our own mics again, so hopefully the quality of the audio is a little bit better for our audio listeners especially.
I can't wait to shock my lips like old times.
I don't know if you... maybe you'll do that. Who knows? So, we'll see. What?
Why couldn't I?
I mean, you can if you want to. Is it something you want to do?
I sort of. I
Like
have a
for
weird
for
draw
old
to
time's
it.
sake.
It's a unique feeling. It's a unique experience. Tingles in the gums.
Larry, as you know, I run purely on caffeine and self-validation. So, do you think the lead-in is a good thing? You think teasing what's coming up in the episode, like, stick around, or should I just nix that altogether?
I think the tease is great. The tease gets everyone ready for what's about to happen.
Because they're like, what game is it? And it's Call of Duty. So if you were on the hook for figuring out what game it was that was ditching something, you don't have to listen anymore. Close it out. Leave us a 1-star review on iTunes.
Go ahead and smash that unfollow button.
How are you doing, my friend?
I am good. My family has been sick for like 3 weeks.
Yes.
And now we're not, so I'm on top of the world. Also, I repaired a lawnmower today, so I'm feeling real manly.
Like a real man.
Sorry, ladies, I'm taken.
You cleaned that carburetor.
I did.
You duct taped over an air filter.
An air filter casing that wouldn't stay shut because the plastic warped.
Right.
And I don't know the words for the other thing I messed with.
Who
But
knows?
I messed with a thing with some springs and stuff to make it stick in a place where it would work good.
So manly. We are the Player 3
Goodly.
podcast. We get together every Monday over here on twitch.tv/Player3 podcast to talk about our favorite thing, lawnmower repair, and then move on to video game news and topics and random questions and the like. And then we push it out on iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, wherever you're listening to us. Let me just say thank you. We're 140 episodes into this, and we don't tell you enough how much we appreciate you following, listening, hanging out with us. And if there's anything we can improve upon, drop it in your trash can, because that's our suggestion box. Okay. Oh, you tricked them into thinking we cared, Larry.
But for real, if the show has gotten old and stale to you, go ahead and hit that unfollow button. But also, we have some new things on the horizon.
We do. And those will come to more fruition later. But just know that
giving you the little tease.
that coming up, maybe some format changes, maybe some new segments, maybe some new voices and faces. Who knows? The world, Larry, you're fired. That's basically what I'm getting at.
Not that we're bringing different people on, but we're both undergoing plastic surgery and vocal cord surgery.
Exactly. So, all right, Larry, let's get this show started.
Fine.
Like we get every show started with, what have you been consuming?
Every time, for years, it was releases of the week. Every time I'm ready for you to say releases of the week, and then it's what have you been consuming? And I'm like, oh yeah, I wrote something on that.
Well, and just as a bit of a heads up, no releases of the week this week. Nothing super major coming out this week. So we're just going to be skipping right over that segment.
No releases of the week.
Clap, clap. That's what I should start doing, coming in with the whisper clap at the end.
Yeah.
Clap, clap.
Yeah.
I like that. All right. What have you been consuming, Larry?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. Can I look at the show now?
Yeah, you
I
can.
forgot what I've consumed.
There you go.
All right. So Netflix has remade the show Lost in Space, and it's actually really good.
Spoiler alert, they have no idea where they are, but they are in space.
Somewhere. Aren't we all, though? If you think about it, aren't we all lost in space?
Very welcome to Existential Crisis 3 podcast.
But did you ever watch the old show or the
No.
movie? No?
No.
Oh, I loved the movie as a kid. I've only seen a couple episodes of the super old show. But we watched it, and it's been good. It's a good family show, which is not something Netflix currently has a lot of.
Mm-hmm.
Most things we gotta wait for the kids
Outside
to
of
go to bed.
Altered Carbon, obviously.
Obviously.
I've only attempted to watch the first 10 minutes of Altered Carbon.
I watched the whole first episode, and I was like, yeah, no.
Yeah.
So Lost in Space. Taylor Swift covered September.
Like the song?
Do you
Remember the 21st night of September. Yeah, that's a great song.
The song just makes you want to dance.
I love that
Have
song.
You heard
You
the
know who
cover?
else loves that song?
Who?
Bill I Am. Billy Croft, my father. He loves the Temptations.
Have you heard her cover though?
No, I have not.
Turn it into a slow emotion song. It is atrocious. Atrocious.
So you just added this to the list to crap on it?
Yeah.
Nice.
I consumed it and then I promptly vomited it out of my body violently.
You'll
And
have
she
to-
changes the date. I don't know why. She's like, "Do you remember the 28th night of
What?
September?" I don't know. And then she's like, "Body," and I'm like, "No, Taylor, no, no."
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to look up this train wreck
It's
when
so
we're done with this
bad.
podcast.
It's
This
so
sounds
bad.
awful. Wow, way to take a classic and just ruin it.
Yeah.
All right.
Taylor, what are you doing with your life?
Mhm.
Also, Overwatch Uprising event.
Okay, yeah. So as we know, if you're unfamiliar with this podcast, I hate all of the Overwatch PvE stuff. So I rely on you for all of the feedback about it, and it's not because I don't like it.
Mhm.
It's because there are things I would rather do in Overwatch than play the PvE.
I understand. I actually found it a little underwhelming, and it's not the event's fault. It's my fault. You remember, it's been over a year. Blizzard had that real cryptic ad where they were looking for new employees to
Mhm.
work on
Yeah.
PvE.
There was
stuff.
a ton of speculation that they were working on like a full-blown single-player thing.
Yeah, so I jumped straight into that. But also, Jeff Kaplan has talked about last time when Uprising was happening. He talked about how it was like a test run for them to have bigger PvE experiences, and I thought this is going to be the one. We're going to see something big, but no, it's not. It's a short little level, and it's plenty fun. Once I accepted it for what it was, it's a fun little event. But I would love to see something bigger in scale PvE wise in Overwatch, and this ain't it. But aside from that, the skins are pretty cool, and the whole event thing has gotten a lot more enjoyable for me ever since I just stopped caring about getting all the skins I want,
Yeah.
which is really their fault. When the skins were attainable, like 1,000 gold, I was hooked in. But once they put them all, like once everything was 3 times that price and there's no hope of me getting anything, I was like, okay, you guys do you.
Yeah, I do feel like they've kind of missed the mark as far as balancing it, and I'm sure they have metrics to show the numbers that they're pulling in, and I'm sure I'm way off base in assuming this, but I do feel like there's a sweet spot of like for people like us, mainly you, who I play with my Overwatch League skins. That's it. And I watch enough Overwatch League. I've now earned 2 of the random 100 point lottery drops or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
but for me, like the skins have never been that big a deal. If I get it, I get it. But for someone like you who is like, hey, I may be after this on a skin or whatever, like you were willing to drop not a ton of money, but a little bit of coin during events to maybe have the off chance of getting it. And I know a couple times you did get the stuff that you were after, but
Yeah.
now like they have crossed that threshold of just like and now bringing in like the old stuff, like you can now get what was the last year's
Uprising.
Uprising. This one's called Retribution. That's right.
I put Uprising, didn't I?
Yeah, you did. That's why I
my
was
bad.
confused.
I've been using Uprising for both things.
Yeah,
Sorry,
so this one's
listeners.
Retribution. Last one was Uprising, but now they've pulled in both of the skins and voice lines and all that into it, and so you can get any of that in a drop now because it's guaranteed. You get one event item per loot box, right?
Yes.
So
So that includes all those sprays
Right.
and everything, which they've so overinflated it with. And I hadn't thought about it, but yeah, they're bringing in last year's sprays and everything too. So, like, there's just no hope. There's no chance. And also, we discovered something really interesting. I don't know if you were on the night we figured this out. Andrew's been getting duplicates.
Mhm.
Were you on when we figured this
Yes.
out? Yeah. So, listeners, if you don't know, so Overwatch, we were told they got rid of duplicates. Well, that doesn't mean that once you've attained all of the common items, you will only get uncommon and higher items. It just means that now now you've got all the common items. When you should get a common item, you'll get a duplicate instead.
Mhm.
And that just felt very underhanded to me.
Yeah.
I am not pleased with that whole system, but
Because I think you said it the night we discovered it, but it is one of those things. Like if you've put in the time to unlock that much, at least like make it worth my while by giving me something above and beyond. Like, because that shows some dedication to have played that much.
yeah.
And if it does that for just random loot box drops, I imagine it does it also for loot boxes that you purchase, because I don't think there's anything really within the system to differentiate, right?
I don't think not with the rarity system. No.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Anything else?
No, well, season 2 of Jessica Jones. We've been working our way through that. I've really enjoyed it. For me, Jessica Jones is my favorite of the Netflix Marvel stuff. I guess we've covered this before. I won't get too in the weeds on it, but I just think it's a really solid show. I enjoy it, and it's great.
All right. Well, I have been watching Parks and Rec for the first time ever. I've always been told you need to give it a shot. Like, you're going to if you like The Office, you're going to love it, yada, yada. So I finally jumped in and was like, okay, I'm just going to marathon through it. I'm already through almost the first 4 seasons because that's just the way I watch television. In some ways, I like it more than The Office. So The Office did this thing where, like, in the beginning, I feel like they were really trying to make believable characters, and then they slowly started to digress into, like, caricatures.
Yeah.
Whereas Parks and Rec, I think, kind of starts there and begins to humanize their characters as the series goes on.
Yeah.
And I think I appreciate that approach a little more. Not to say it. Look, if I'm being completely honest, and I'm only halfway through, I still love The Office way more than I love Parks and Rec. But I do appreciate that approach of, like, we're going to start with the most ridiculous parts of these characters and then start to flesh them out as human beings, because then it's not as jarring when, like, a Kevin becomes a complete and total moron by the end of The Office.
Yeah.
There are some things I've pointed out to my wife and to you that I really appreciate about the show. The first is that I love the Kyle shtick on the shoe shine stand, and apparently Lauren's watched through it a couple times and she's never noticed that it's the same person. I don't understand how you can not pick up on that, but
Yeah.
she's like me. She does a million things while she's watching television, so that may explain it. But I love that whole shtick of Kyle and, like, why does this guy keep coming back?
Yeah.
I love how they always ask Ann to make pancakes whenever they go to her house. I think that's hilarious. But my favorite thing about that show is the townspeople are just complete and utter morons.
Yes.
Like 95% of them. And, like, every town hall meeting just devolves into people having stupid complaints about things that they don't know much of anything about. And I really appreciate that. I think that's, like, a really funny shtick. I think the show has a lot of that. Like, it's rooted in a lot of unbelievability. That's just kind of a caricature of real life issues, and it's a lot of fun.
Have you gotten to the one yet where Leslie really banks on the town hall meeting devolving into chaos?
Yes, well, she's trying to just keep working with Ben. Yeah.
It goes perfectly.
And then I have been playing the new God of War, to bring this back around to video games.
Never heard of them.
So I am only about 4 hours into the game, maybe 4 or 5 hours in, and it's like a 30-hour campaign or whatever, which is crazy for a God of War game because they used to just be like 10, 15-hour games.
I have a question.
Yes.
I've been very confused on this point the whole time. Is this a true sequel, or is this?
Yes. So it is a rebootquel.
Okay.
It harkens back often to the previous trilogy, but the previous trilogy is rooted in Greek mythology, whereas this is in Norse mythology. And I'm not super familiar with the entire story of God of War, but this is basically Kratos has gone into hiding. He has a wife and a kid, and something happens and he has to go on this mission with his son, and that is threatening the secrecy that he has veiled himself in. But so in a lot of ways it is a reboot because it takes place not in a different universe or whatever, and the storyline isn't reset, but it does take place in a different era and in a completely different mythology. It's also a reboot in a sense that the gameplay is like completely altered from the way that it used to be in a lot of really positive ways. And I think Sony, as far as their exclusives have gone, have kind of all fallen into line as far as the style of gameplay being like that over-the-shoulder third-person action kind of deal. So think Uncharted, think The Last of Us, those sorts of games like that. God of War really is a lot more like that than the old fashioned like hack and slash. I get brawler's not the right word, but just kind of that more loosey goosey combat or whatever. There's been a lot of like comparison to the Dark Souls series with the game, and I don't necessarily see that any further than just the fact that it's like the control scheme's kind of similar. You do a lot of rolling, but it isn't necessarily like as parry based or and I don't think that the combat is as methodical necessarily as the Dark Souls series goes. Now, that's not to take anything away from the combat of God of War, because I don't know. The thing about Sony games and the combat in them, in Uncharted, especially, and with like Bloodborne, even though that was developed by a third party and was made exclusively on PS4, but I feel like with the combat with those games, like you feel the weight of your character, and when you're playing God of War, you feel super powerful while you're playing it, and like obviously being only a few hours into it, not everything, the system hasn't evolved to me to be able to unlock the full power and potential of Kratos as a character. But so your main weapon, well, your only weapon really is this axe that you have, and it's a giant axe being wielded by a giant man, and when you're in the combat, you feel the weight of that. It's also got this cool mechanic where you can throw your axe, and then you have to recall it back to you. And that's used both in combat and, I mean, it still has that classic God of War, like you get to, you have to solve like environmental puzzles in order to progress in the map and all that sort of stuff. So the axe plays a big part in that, and like finding places to throw your axe to hold some mechanism in place or whatever. But you have to recall it manually to yourself. So you can throw it, you keep fighting with your fist, then you call it back. And this has been mentioned in several reviews that I've read as well, but the feeling that you get when you press triangle and that axe comes back into your hand, and if I threw it just like across this room, it'll take it just a short time to come back to me, whereas if like I throw it across a field, it takes a little bit more time to come back to me. Like the feeling of that is really, really cool. And if you go and you read anything like where the developers talk about the combat, they'll say they spent months working on that very mechanic. I think they mentioned it took them almost a year to get that to feel awesome. Now, as far as the story goes, and I'm not going to get into any spoilers or anything like that, I haven't seen enough of it really to make any kind of a judgment about it necessarily. Kratos was a really hard character to care about in the original trilogy because he's just this angry god that you can't relate to, who had sex with a bunch of women and like was just crazy strong and powerful, and like there was no real grounding moment. So like, I mean, this isn't a spoiler, the game is about him and his son's relationship. Like that's what the whole marketing has been about. So that in and of itself grounds him already. But I'm already noting how they're pulling in like his past and this relationship with his son to bring that connection more. And I'm really banking on them following through on it, because currently it's still kind of like that. He's a little hollow, he's a little gruff, he's a little short, but I think that's the way it's supposed to be, because it's connecting this Kratos back to the old Kratos. So I'm excited. I'll hopefully have it beat by the time we come around the next Monday, and I'll have some more thoughts on it. But definitely enjoying it so far, and would definitely recommend it. So outside of that, that's pretty much all I've been consuming. So let's move on, Larry, to topics. Yeah, we've got some topics for you. Larry, why don't you kick us off here, because I just went on a diatribe about God of War.
I have modified my topic.
All right.
To cram in another thing that I want to mention.
All right, fantastic.
So my topic is now old games that you can and should play.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
Just two of them. Just want to point out that next month, one of the free games with gold is the Xbox 360 Streets of Rage collection. That was a trilogy of games that originally came out on the Sega Genesis, and you loved that game.
Yes.
So it's just a side-scroll and beat-em-up game, and you should play that because it's awesome if you haven't played it before. But then the second one I want to mention is one I've mentioned often on this show, even though you don't remember it.
I know you've mentioned it. I don't know anything about it, so it's
care.
just white noise when you talk
We
about
never
it.
talk. You're not the man I fell in love with.
That's not true. I am better than the man he fell in love with.
But they recently made Project Breakdown from the original Xbox backwards compatible on the Xbox One, and I freaking love that game.
Which is the same as Crackdown.
No. But it was an interesting game at the time. Everything's in first person. Dead Rising. No, not Dead Rising. Dying Light. That's the game that has felt the most like Project Breakdown to me. Everything happens in first person. You drink a soda in the first person. You throw up in a toilet in first person. It's a very
like real life
person game. Yeah,
it's like real life.
Every time I've thrown up in a toilet, it's been first person in real life.
Occasionally, depending on the night, I may transition out of body into more of a top-down experience.
Gotcha. So it was an interesting mechanic at the time. It is sort of a shooter game, but it's more of a fighting your way through game. Throughout the game, you wind up getting these powers, and there's this race of alien creatures sort of breaking through into our world from another dimension, and a secret government organization trying to bring them here and bridge the worlds, and you're trying to stop all of it. And you get these powers, so you can pick up a gun and shoot, but it doesn't hurt the monsters. It'll hurt the people, but you're just far more effective with your powers. So you wind up going through in first person, and it has all these different combos you can use in the fighting. And it's just you go through and beat everything up with your powers. It's fantastic. It's a lot of fun, and you can probably find a copy for real cheap. And I'm sure with them making it backwards compatible, you can just buy a digital copy.
Yeah.
So
I'm trying to figure out a game to possibly compare it to that's a little more modern. Is it kind of like Dishonored, maybe? Kind of first person, you're relying on
never
powers.
played Dishonored. Have you played Prototype?
Okay, yeah. Okay. So
It's like a first person sort of Prototype.
Okay. Yeah.
Less mobility though.
Okay.
More if you had like a mobile thing you could shift into and a strong thing you'd shift into. You're sort of like the strong thing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like you're turning into this other thing to fight, and you have to fight these things that are breaking through. And story wise, it's a really good story. And I will spoil one thing because it's been out for many years.
Gosh, spoiling a 15-year-old game, decade-old game.
Unlike Overwatch Retribution, if you jump out of the helicopter at the end, it actually does impact the story.
Oh, okay. All right, a little branching narrative there at the end.
Yeah, right at the end of the game, dive out of the helicopter. Trust me, it actually gives you a better ending.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. So you own an original Xbox, correct?
Yeah.
My brother owned an original Xbox. I did not. So what are other games you would like to see come to this program that were kind of like your bread and butter? I imagine you played just a ton of Halo.
Yeah, that's why I bought the Xbox.
Right? Yeah, that's why everybody bought the Xbox. Well, my brother bought it for Madden 06, and it was a complete and utter. No, I'm sorry, that was the Xbox 360. It was just so bad that I think it was on the original Xbox.
Yeah. I would say the original Prince of Persia trilogy. Not original. We had one way back in the day. But the Prince of Persia trilogy from that generation.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've said it many times before, that is, in my opinion, the single greatest story that's ever been told in video games.
Mm-hmm.
I love the story of that Prince of Persia trilogy. So I'd love to see that come. And I think some of those games are backwards compatible, but I don't think the full trilogy is yet.
I think they remade it on the 360, and then that remake is backwards compatible. I'll double check on that while you talk.
Well, that's one thing I'd like to see come back. The Gauntlet game that was released in that generation. Me and my friends spent many all-nighters just playing our way through Gauntlet. I'd love to see that come back if it hasn't yet. Let's see. I have a whole drawer full of Xbox games. I was not prepared for this question, though. I haven't thought about it.
My apologies. I did just spring it on you. But apparently, let's see. Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time is backwards compatible.
That's the first game.
Okay, that one is backwards compatible on the
and
Xbox.
Then there's Warrior Within and Two Thrones, I think.
That's all I'm currently seeing on this list. But
so they need to bring the other two. The first game is really good, and it is worth playing even if they never bring the other two over. The middle game, in my opinion, is the worst of the three, even though it's solid in its own right. But the third game just brings everything together in such a great way. It was one of those things where you could tell they actually set out to produce a trilogy rather than, oh, okay, well, I guess we can make another one of these.
Yeah, Sands of Time is the only one that is backwards compatible. For me, there's one game that comes to mind, and let me make sure it is not on this list before I go on and on about it, but it is a game that me and my family played the crap out of. It is not on this list, and that is Fusion Frenzy. Now, I've never been like a big party game person, so like I've never really played Mario Party or anything like that. But for some reason, I don't know if it was like a demo on one of those like distributed discs or whatever. We played Fusion Frenzy, and then my brother ended up going and just buying the entire game, and we played the crap out of that disc. Like we burned a hole through it. We played it so much because it was a fun game because we grew up in a household that was super competitive, and it was competitive without the self-awareness of how skilled you are at something. So like we would play Halo as a household, but when I would beat everybody, they would get mad or whatever. And then in other ways, my brother and sisters would beat me at things that I didn't realize I just wasn't as good as them. But Fusion Frenzy was like the great equalizer in our household. Like we all had our own little games in that we were really, really good at. And it was all just dumb little quirky, like top-down objective-based games. Whether it was like racing or trying to deliver like a ball into a goal while something was shooting at you, or like jumping over lasers before they could take your character out or whatever, like just dumb stuff like that. But it was a staple in our household, and I would love to relive those memories.
Yeah. One that was announced in the same wave as this Project Breakdown that I'm excited to go back and play because I never got the chance to is Morrowind, the third Elder Scrolls game. A lot of Elder Scrolls fans consider that to be the best of the series, but I just never. I didn't get into Elder Scrolls till Oblivion, which was on the 360, so I just never got a chance to do Morrowind. So I'm excited to track down a copy of Morrowind and play that.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people excited about it because I think there is a big difference between the gameplay and the world build and like the quest that you do in Morrowind compared to Oblivion. Like there's this big gap, but I think Morrowind's got like an old charm about it that people really love. So have you ever tried the Elder Scrolls Online stuff now that like they don't have like the monthly subscription or anything like that?
I didn't know they didn't have the monthly subscription.
Oh yeah, they dropped that they dropped that I think as it came out on console because they just realized like the model wasn't sustainable.
Yeah, I wrote the game off entirely because of that, to be honest. I had no idea they changed it.
So because they have a Morrowind expansion for that now. So
now I'm gonna really miss playing Overwatch with you. It's been good. It's been a good run.
I always wondered because like I know you're a huge Skyrim fan, and I always wondered why you never jumped into that, and now it makes sense. Because I mean, it is one of those things like you don't want to have to pay $10 a month to access one game. Like there's no if Overwatch was to do that right now, I'd stop playing.
Yeah,
because I'm like. I can pay $10 for Netflix and get a million things to watch, or I can pay $10 just to play this one game that, albeit I play it a ton.
Yeah.
But, so yeah, they dropped that on console. And I assume it's probably pretty cheap to jump in.
You should not have told me
I
this.
apologize. So
I have a wife and a family now, Luke. What have you done?
All right, let's move on before I make Larry spend any more money, unless you have any other games you want to mention.
I don't.
All right. Moving on to my topic.
Oh, hey, one last thing. I'm sorry. The Morrowind thing, I'm going to double back to that just real quick. One of the things I'm most excited about, and part of the reason so many people love it, is you had a lot of freedom in that game. So my understanding is that the things didn't scale with you. Like, there were enemies you just couldn't fight till you leveled up enough. But you could go try if you wanted to. And there was like no limit to the things you could do with the potions. You could essentially like just become godlike in terms of what you were capable of. And later games kind of put a limiting factor with everything scaling with you. So I actually like that. If you play a game for a while, getting to the point where you're just unstoppable.
Well, it was the early days of like kind of that more modern style open world RPG thing. And within that, there's a lot of lessons to be learned. And a lot of stuff that you can probably break in a lot of really fun ways. So,
Yeah, you can. I've heard you can kill like characters that make it impossible to go back later and do quests.
see, I like to think of those things more as like it's a feature, not a bug. You know, I wish more games would implement that, like Dark Souls. I think I've told this story on the podcast before, but I was going through Dark Souls 1. I was having a really good time. I beat a couple bosses, got to this segment, and there was this knight standing there. And if you've never played a Dark Souls game, it's like Australia. Everything's trying to kill you, right? So I walk up to this guy, and look, I ain't got time for words, right? So I just draw my sword. I hit the guy, and this guy that was watching the stream was like, "What have you done?" And apparently, like, the dude can really, really help you, but if you attack him, he hates you for the remainder of your playthrough. So I was kind of... that's the reason I quit playing Dark Souls, because I was like, I'm going to have to restart an entirely new save. But I like that.
Yeah.
You know?
And I'm excited about no character being safe for a very gruesome reason. The way I like to play through RPGs like Elder Scrolls is go through, do all the good guy stuff, elevate to the highest level, save the Empire, and then just plummet to the dark side, do all the evil quests. And then once all the evil quests are done, kill every person in the Empire that I can kill.
And if that's everyone in the entire universe that you've built, we will do it. All right, let's move on.
All right.
To my topic.
Talk about your topic now.
To my topic. I want to talk about Call of Duty, Battle Royales, and just the state of gaming in general in that little corner of gaming that is all of a sudden consuming everything like wild kudzu. This is an article from Steven Sotillo over on Kotaku. It is titled, Sources. Next Call of Duty won't have a solo campaign, may have Battle Royale. It reads, this fall's Call of Duty Black Ops 4 will essentially be multiplayer only, lacking the kind of single-player campaign that has been a key component of the annual series for over a decade. Two sources familiar with the game tell Kotaku, corroborating a report published earlier today at Polygon. It was also picked up by Charlie Intel and a million other websites, as you can imagine. One of those sources also echoed a report from top Call of Duty information broker Charlie Intel, saying that the new game will have a Battle Royale mode. That's the kind of last player standing mode that's been taking over gaming for the past year. What with the success of PlayerUnknown's Battleground, Fortnite Battle Royale, and a myriad of competitors. So far, no big budget game studio has added a Battle Royale mode to a big franchise series, but it has seemed like only a matter of time before it hits Call of Duty or a Battlefield, a Division, or a Destiny. Details are murky, and Call of Duty publisher Activision isn't talking, quote, we don't comment on rumor and speculation, end quote. It responded via email to Kotaku today. Recently, Call of Duty games have been bursting with modes, including the increasingly that's a typo. Including the increasingly elaborate Zombies modes pioneered by Black Ops 4's lead studio Treyarch. Black Ops 3 already offered two-player co-op in that game's campaign. Larry?
Yeah.
As somebody who I know hasn't played very many Call of Duties in the last, decade?
Probably. Close to it, yeah.
What do you make of this news?
It's been like 6 years, actually. I played them in college.
Oh, okay.
So,
That's only 6 years ago?
Yeah, I graduated.
Yeah, 2012.
2012. Yeah. I'm kind of split on it. I'm worried about the oversaturation of Battle Royale modes.
Yeah.
But there's a part of me that's also like excited to see some of these like big experienced developers put one together, because I think they may be able to do it even better than Fortnite has done it.
Mm-hmm.
As far as Call of Duty removing their campaign, though, like I actually don't have very strong feelings on that. I've played several Call of Duty campaigns, and they've had some good ones, but I feel like they've had more mediocre ones than they've had good ones.
Mm-hmm.
So even though it's a staple for the series, I don't think it's a big deal to drop it.
So the day that this news dropped, which was Tuesday of last week, it kind of dropped in waves. So it was like hey, they're dropping the single player, they're not going to be able to make it. So the reason for it, I'll read this next paragraph. According to Polygon, as the multi-year development cycle of Black Ops 4 moved toward the game's October release, quote, it became evident that development on the single player campaign would not be completed, end quote. That was kind of the first chunk of news that came out. And so it was one of those like, okay, well, if you're removing something, like, are you going to have a complete project that feels like the $60 you charged for before? And then the Battle Royale mode came out, and I think that kind of softened me on the news a little bit. I'm more concerned about the trend rather than the move. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because I am a single player guy. I mean, I do like to play Overwatch. I like those sorts of things, but the majority of time I've spent with Call of Duty World War II was playing through the campaign. I played through the Battlefield 1 campaign. Like these, I enjoy the campaigns of those games. And while you have to probably imagine that Activision has the heat mapping on this to know what percentage of the players that are installing this game are playing the single player mode, and that number's probably just infinitesimal.
Yeah.
Like so there's there's an economic reason for this, but it also kind of makes it sound like, hey, we were trying to do something, maybe they were trying to do something ambitious with it and it fell apart and they don't have time to rebuild it either. So I think this can go a lot of routes. It could be something where it's like the battle royale mode is coming in and replacing it. It could be the battle royale mode is coming in and replacing it, but we'll have some DLC that will include a single player campaign. Because I think out of all of the Call of Duty storylines that are going on currently, the Black Ops storyline is the one that people care about.
Yeah.
And it's odd to call this game Black Ops 4 and not have a single player campaign when you're not connecting it back to the previous 3 games, right? Like, why not just reboot it, have a lot of the similar mechanics, maybe place it in the same timeline, but call it something totally different. I guess you're running on brand recognition to an extent, but the move just doesn't make a ton of sense if you don't have some sort of plan moving in the future where this can possibly come as like a DLC thing at the end. But as far as the trend is concerned, I don't want to see studios dropping single player to pursue after these kind of multiplayer flash in the pan trends that could possibly be lucrative in terms of the money, you know?
Yeah.
I think there's a balance we can strike.
Yeah.
But I mean, look, they mentioned in the article, and I think Call of Duty gets a bad rap in a lot of ways that they don't deserve, and I think they get a bad rap in some ways that they do. But you can't argue that you're not getting $60 worth of content out of the games that you get in Call of Duty. Now, there was a report, I can't remember where I read it, of just like kind of looking at the base maps that come out with a Call of Duty, and like that number has gone down in the past few years. But zombies has just become this crazy thing, right? Like fully fleshed out zombie campaigns, like feature rich, more than it ever was when it was originally introduced in the original Black Ops or Nazi zombies in World at War. You know, like it's moved far beyond that. So you can't argue that they haven't been giving you $60 worth. And I think if you replace a 6-hour campaign, which is what the Call of Duty campaigns have become, with a robust battle royale mode, I mean, you can't scoff at that, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think so.
But then there's also news that surprise, surprise, Battlefield 5 is currently working on a battle royale prototype. This is over on VentureBeat from Jeff Grubb. It says EA's DICE Studio is testing a battle royale mode for Battlefield 5 that features similar gameplay to mega hits like Fortnite and PUBG, according to someone with knowledge of the studio who asked to remain anonymous. In those last player standing shooters, 100 players drop into a map and fight until only one person or team is left standing, and that game type has taken over the industry. So this is going to be everywhere.
Yeah.
Here's what I want to see, Larry. We're moving into E3 season. I'm almost to the point where when we get to the prediction episode, I just want to be like, no predictions about Battle Royale mode, because I think everyone's coming out of the gate to do it. We're going to see a Battle Royale at probably everyone but Bethesda.
Yeah.
You know? And I'm talking either it's something attached to Fortnite or PUBG, or it's an Activision coming out, or EA coming out, or Ubisoft coming out with Battle Royale Division or whatever. Like I'm to the point where I'm almost like no Battle Royale predictions unless it's just something crazy. Like Project Cars 3 is going to be Battle Royale only or something like that. But now that I even say that doesn't even sound ridiculous to say, right? Like,
I'll give you one. Ori and the Battle Royale.
Oh man. Honestly, at this point, man, it's spaghetti noodles. You know, you're throwing them at the wall, you're seeing what sticks. And so
Shovel Knight 3 Battle Royale.
Tetris Battle Royale.
Firewatch Battle Royale.
Here's what I want to see. I want to see E3 pass. All right. I want to see all 150, 200 Battle Royale modes get announced and demoed on the show floor. I want all of those Battle Royale modes to enter into one map until one is left standing. I want a Battle Royale of Battle Royale modes. I'm sure some big site's going to run some sort of tournament on that where it's like, hey, we're putting all the Battle Royale modes in a tournament bracket and having you vote on what's best. But that's what I want to see. And that's what we're going to be left with. We're going to be left with that big a pool of Battle Royale stuff. And
you're not wrong.
So my question to you, Larry, is you already mentioned, and I agree, seeing one of these big budget studios get their hands on a Battle Royale and see it polished. Like, that's my big problem with PUBG. It was my problem the little bit I played Fortnite. Apparently it's a much more polished product now than it was when we played. But I want to see somebody really deliver that like AAA feel to combat. Mm-hmm. Like that weight I was talking about with the God of War stuff, you don't feel that in PUBG. Like your character just kind of skates across the land and there's no real weight to the movement or anything like that. Like I want to feel it.
And you feel like you almost feel like the fighting is random to some degree.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Even as far as it's developed, there's still issues.
So outside of that polish and that like AAA big budget feel, what this genre is in its infant stages. Like there's a lot of room for it to grow. But what do you think can be done different than what Fortnite, PUBG, those games are doing that can really attract you personally, and then on a grander scale compete with those two juggernauts?
I know this is a part of polish, so technically I'm failing to answer your question appropriately. But when it comes to PvP stuff, the gunplay has to feel a certain way. This goes back to the weight thing, I know. But for PUBG, it's just too glitchy and unreliable. But even in Fortnite, you can tell like this wasn't really a game that was designed with PvP at the forefront of everyone's minds. It just doesn't feel right. I want that Destiny precision. I want us to just be. I want it to feel like a good and fair and a fight where your skill actually matters. Mm-hmm. The guns are just too loose, and I don't know. I want the gunplay to feel better. Yeah, and I think that is where the big studios are set to do something that Fortnite and PUBG haven't been able to do yet.
Salty and Zyger are here. Welcome to the stream, my friends. Zyger says, Pokemon Battle Frontier, 100 trainers fall on island. They have to find Pokeballs with random Pokemon in it and battle until there's one left. When you lose a battle, you're out.
I actually don't hate that.
No, that's a fantastic idea. And I think that's going to be the interesting thing. Like we have the car battle royale and was it H1Z1 or Days, one of those games. Like, but seeing the battle royale mode kind of get implemented in genres that aren't like third person action shooters or first person shooters or whatever, I think is an interesting concept. I don't know if, Pokemon is going to ever do anything like that, but as an idea, like that's what I want to see. I want to see crazy innovation come in through it. But if we're going back to just like what we think of right now as battle royale games, shooters, I want games to have more of like an overworld impact than just the match that you're in. And I think I mentioned this a little bit when we talked about games we'd like to see implement a battle royale, and we were talking about The Division. But the idea that like, hey, the loot that I take out with me, I can then use in, my PvE stuff on The Division or whatever. In Call of Duty, it would be interesting if it's like, hey, the loot I get out with, I can then use in multiplayer over here. Like, but give it more weight to where I'm going in and it's not just, oh, I can take a screenshot and share it on my Twitter that I got a chicken dinner or whatever. But like, oh, I got out and I had this weapon that now I can use all the time. And I think it would make the game more interesting because, okay, you like to run, we talked about it a couple weeks ago. We have our loadouts we like to run on PUBG or whatever, but it's like, man, I really need a submachine gun for multiplayer on the smaller maps that we play. So I'm going to have to go in and try to win my match with the submachine gun or whatever. And you can scale it so that it doesn't waste everybody's time. But like, okay, the top 30 randomly get one item that they'll take out, the top 25 to the top, and then whoever wins gets to take their entire loadout with them. But just adding something that like gives it more gravity over the game as a whole, because PUBG and Fortnite really kind of lack in that regard, because the game is the game. I mean, Fortnite has the, its separate modes or whatever, but at the end of the day, the Battle Royale kind of stands as its own thing.
This may be in violation of the spirit of Battle Royale games to some degree, because the idea is we all drop in the same and it's pure chance.
Mm-hmm.
But I would like, Destiny has me thinking of this, but it shows up in a lot of games. I'd like to see some sort of a class system of you're dropping in as this type of person, and maybe you find the stuff you need to excel in that role. Maybe you don't. Okay, you're a medic. You get more skills out of the first aid kits and stuff. But
oh yeah, that'd be awesome.
To find it to use it.
And I think this was in a totally different report, and I remember reading this, but then possibly like with the new Call of Duty, they're going to try to emulate a little more of like the Overwatch experience as far as like classes and roles and stuff like that of the characters. That's just a rumor, but I like that idea in, because in the military, everybody's got a different role. You've got your medics, you've got your scouts, all the roles you see in like Battlefield 1 or whatever.
Yeah.
It would be cool in that same way. Like, okay, I am playing as a support character, so when I find a health pack, and if I distribute it to people, it's going to give them a 10% boost over if they were to just pick it up on their own. Because watching streamers play, what I notice a lot more happening is like groups will drop down and then they'll just scatter for the first like half of the match. And then when it starts getting down to a smaller circle, they'll gather up together and fight again. But really like focusing tactically, you have to stay together as a team so that you can, pass out ammo. Like this person gets 10% more ammo when they pick it up or whatever. Like that would be a really cool system.
Yeah.
Anything else you think?
I really like your idea of bringing stuff out of the zone. That's good. But yeah, I don't really have any other big things to add, I guess.
I think I like the idea also of we've been playing a lot of Overwatch, so it's like what would it look like to have really, really specified roles where it's not just a little stat boost or whatever, but it's just that we all have different abilities, and we have to like, you can have a composition that really works in the beginning stage of games, but then you have to rely a lot more on skill in the later stage when it's like close quarters or whatever. Like, I want to see more playing around with that sort of stuff. And then, I've said this from the beginning too, is a way of keeping people who are out of the match engaged by providing them some sort of role in terms of maybe they control like a horde of zombies in the closing circle or whatever and can attack teams, or there's sorts of games where like there's somebody in God mode that can release certain things on the environment.
Each team has the option to send in a drop, and everyone can still see the drop and take the drop, but your dead teammate decides where your drop's going to go.
Mm-hmm.
But adding on to your comments on the loadout stuff, I wasn't thinking necessarily like the limited medic sort of thing. My mind initially went there with Destiny, like bring in like some crazy magic skill sets.
Oh yeah.
So like, all right, if you run this character, one of your abilities is you can bubble inside the storm, and as long as people stay within 10 meters of you for however many seconds, they don't get hurt by the storm. Something like that.
Oh yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. We're at this stage now. Like, I don't want to say you can build the world as big as you would want, but like, I think you can kind of let your imagination run wild, and these bigger budget studios are gonna be the ones that like they innovate on the smaller things within the genre. Like, you're never going to see a Call of Duty or a Battlefield really try to introduce one of these game modes. But now that somebody's done it successfully, they're the ones that have the budgetary like freedom to really iterate on it and develop these features. Whereas, smaller studios, or, a studio that's kind of like Epic Games with Fortnite, where they're trying to scale up, ramp up, because they never imagined this would be as popular as it is. Like, they're catching up to the audience that they have. Like, do you think that this is a game mode that's around to stay? Like the team-based online multiplayer shooters, like Call of Duty's multiplayer was a staple for years and years?
I think it is for a long time. I think we're going to see these for a while. I don't think it is just a flash in the pan. And part of the reason for that is, I think for a long time, gamers have wanted these gigantic battle experiences. And we've been at where we can do them for a while. And Battlefield has kind of done that. You can have 50 people at once in the match, right?
Yeah.
It's not 100 yet in Battlefield games, is it?
I think it's 64. I think it's 32 on 32.
Okay.
I may be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong.
But then the problem you run into in that is you still have to break people into smaller squads because 32 voices at once cannot coordinate anything.
Yeah.
And this kind of solves that problem while also giving you that feel of just a gigantic battle happening.
I think this is also like the first step to persistent online battlefields, where there's a server that exists and it is this constant battle of that takes place over months, maybe weeks or months, and you drop in with your squad whenever, and you try to, do what you can as far as resource gathering or pushing the enemy line or whatever. Like, I think back to a game like Mag that really tried to do this, like really huge scale, online multiplayer shooter. And it was a little ahead of its time in terms of like what it was attempting to accomplish and where the technology was at the time. Whereas like now we're getting to the stage where those sorts of things are going to be possible. And I don't know if Battle Royale is going to necessarily be the thing that sticks, but I do think it's a stepping stone to something even bigger that a lot of gamers have wanted, or that studios are going to realize like they never imagined people want it. Like, you think about a game like Destiny or The Division, and it's like, this is a persistent story and like this is persistent environment, but you're really, the objectives you're attempting to accomplish are still very individual. Whereas if you can create something where it's like, it's a 100 versus 100 overworld, and we've got it, to where matchmaking, your server is persistent and it's pretty, populated throughout the day. Like, and you're coming back to achieve the same goal you were trying to achieve a week ago, and you're just trying to chip away at it. Like, I think about Overwatch and the way that we're trying to grind through the like SR ranks or whatever. And, every day is a thing of like, all right, we're trying to climb 100, 150 points today. Like, let's get in there and chip away. If you can attach that to a world and to a story and to like in-game objectives of like, I think that would be really, really cool.
Yeah.
And I think Battle Royale is the first step to that. So, let's see. All right. I don't know anything about Team Fortress 2. I'm going to be honest with you, salty as Chuck.
So his question is, why isn't Team Fortress 2 as popular as Overwatch when Overwatch was being called a Team Fortress spiritual successor? And I think it's because like Team Fortress was around forever. It's an older game, really. But also it never made the jump to console.
Yeah.
Like that's the big thing in Overwatch's explosive success. If it had only released on PC, it wouldn't have been as big a story, I don't think. It would have been another League of Legends. Everybody knows about it, but it opened itself up to triple the audience.
Zyger says because Overwatch has Tracer and she is Bae. Well, and also, and I think, Blizzard doesn't get enough credit for this, but Overwatch was released with such an intentional roadmap that like they knew where they wanted to go with it, and they created the wiggle room to do the things that they needed to do to sustain the audience within it. But from day one of development, they knew this is what we're trying to build. And like, so any of the immeasurable success that they've had has never like rolled over them because they planned for it from the very start. Like, and I think they deserve a lot of credit for that, because it is one of those things like dress for the job you want, not the job you have. Yeah. And Overwatch did that from the start. Like they came in and they were like, we are going to be a staple in this generation on console and PC with the game that we're making. And they delivered on that. Whereas like a game like Destiny that had that same idea of we want to be a 10-year game or whatever, didn't quite have the foresight to give themselves the wiggle room to adjust and iterate on it in such a way that made it successful for that long, So I can't speak to Team Fortress because I don't know anything about it, but I do think Overwatch deserves some credit for that road mapping.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on, Larry.
Fine.
To the news.
With the podcast, guys.
First item on the list. God of War director Cory Barlog posted an emotional reaction to the game's review score. Let's see. This is from Julia Alexander over on Polygon. It says, God of War director Cory Barlog's emotional reaction to the game's undeniably positive reception is the immediate response of a man who's worked tirelessly on developing a franchise and wanting people to adore his work. Barlog says in the video above that he wasn't sure if he wanted to post the video, but felt compelled to as a way to help his son. Barlog, who has become a father since working on the God of War franchise, mentioned that he wanted to help his son see that it's okay to be emotional. The video captures Barlog's instant reaction to seeing scores go up on Metacritic and his relief over the numbers rolling in. Quote, review scores shouldn't matter, but I'm just so effing proud. I'm just so lucky to work with the people that I work with, end quote. This was Barlog saying this. Barlog points out early in the video that this moment has been a long, long time coming, adding that he's definitely feeling jittery and nervous awaiting for the scores. It took Barlog and his team 5 years to develop this new God of War, and he admits that it's all come down to this moment. Did you watch the video, Larry?
No.
Oh my gosh, Larry.
I'm sorry.
Of all people, you should watch it because you'll love it.
I only read the story.
So basically it's him refreshing Metacritic and seeing the scores roll in, and he sees it a 93, then it crawls up to a 94. I can't remember if it's up to a 95 at this point, but he's just, it shows a man openly weeping with joy over something he has tirelessly given himself over to for half a decade of his life. And I think it reminds us of something, Larry. And look, I love talking about video games, and I love railing on the industry when it does stupid things like Cliff Bleszinski's Battle Royale cash grab or whatever. Like, but at the end of the day, these are human beings that make these games. And when you go online to be toxic for the sake of being toxic, or, you know, you throw stones because a message wasn't communicated the way you wanted it, or something didn't meet the expectations that you had set upon it or whatever. These are human beings that are putting their time, effort, and energy into making something that they hope will withstand the test of time and become art, and be like masterpiece art, not become art. But Salty says God of War is so good too, and I completely agree. It's awesome. But I think sometimes we lose the forest through the trees, you know? Mm-hmm. And we're also trigger happy to give our criticism about things. And I'll be the first to say, if something is bad or not good or needs improvement, like, we should be able to criticize those things. But with the constant touchstone of, like, human beings are involved in this thing, and that alone should inform the way that we go about addressing them. Right.
Right.
So just a quick little, moment to say,
game devs have feelings too.
Yeah, exactly. But I enjoyed this, and I even though we've already talked about it, I do encourage you to go back and watch the video because it's cool. Like, that feeling when, this is in no way as far as like scale, scope, and time, similar, but you and we started something called Beyond when we were both in ministry, and it was an area-wide youth thing. And it was two dudes who met at a coffee shop one day and decided we wanted to do something. And the first time we did it, we had like 75 to 100 kids show up, and it was awesome. And I know that moment of like stepping back and seeing it go off and seeing how well it went, and just being like, wow, 6-9 months, however long it took for us to do that, like, is worth it.
And especially, me, the way I get right at the end of planning a big thing like that, the last few days, I have to be tempered by the people around me, because I go through this phase of everything we've done is pure crap. All of this sucks, and it's going to be a disaster.
So I did theater all through high school, and there is the whole, like, I don't know what the word is for it, trope or just general consensus that your penultimate dress rehearsal is always a disaster, and everybody leaves it hating everybody else. But then when you come together for the final dress rehearsal, it all seems to come together, and you don't know like what fairy came in the middle of the night to help it happen. I imagine game development, and from what I read about game development and what I've heard about game development, it's the same way. Like, up until the day it launches, you don't know what you have. And so it's really cool in these moments to see something pan out and really pay off for somebody who put this much time. But it's also a reminder that even a game that gets a 7.5 out of 10 that's the way that people are thinking about it, you know?
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that you take that into account and you give them a 9 because they're people, but it should inform the way that you talk about it and the way that you approach your online interaction about that game.
Yeah.
So, all right, next item on the list, Larry. EA admits that they got it wrong with Star Wars Battlefront 2 loot boxes.
What a timely admission.
This is from Matt Wales over at Eurogamer. A lot of different websites, if you didn't notice today in the show notes, Larry. EA's chief design officer, Patrick Soderlund, has addressed Star Wars Battlefront 2's highly controversial implementation of loot boxes, saying that the publisher, quote, got it wrong, end quote, and, quote, can't afford to make similar mistakes in the future, end quote. Soderlund's comments came during a conversation with The Verge in which he offered some insight into the company's original thinking behind Battlefront 2's loot boxes. Quote, we had the intent that was designed for us to have more people play it over a longer period of time, end quote, Soderlund explained. Quote, and like a lot of other games on the market, to be able to afford to do that, we had an idea of getting returns from that. But at the same time, we got it wrong, end quote. All right.
I've been listening to a Dallas Willard book. He's a he was a theologian, and I actually learned recently he was actually like a highly respected man in the field of philosophy as a whole. But he talks about in this book how we've begun to think of we use the phrase, well, I just blew it, I just messed up, I just got it wrong, to kind of whitewash our failures. And he says we use it to like get around the fact that we are the type of people who blew it. We are the type of people who screw up.
Yeah.
That's what this quote made me.
No, it absolutely is. It's a
we couldn't have known. We just made the what? Come on now.
To bring in a similar example, there's an episode of South Park where where ExxonMobil spills a bunch of gas into the sea and then calls some sort of creature from the abyss that's going to destroy the world. But they keep putting out these commercials where their CEO is just like, we're sorry. We're sorry. And I want to believe that EA has seen the errors of their way, but it's really just to like, oh, that door's locked. We need to find another way in, right? Like,
yeah.
I don't know, man. We were going to talk about it last week, but then we had big storms and you lost your power. But we were going to talk at quite a length about EA. So EA went through some restructuring. They've talked about disruption that's going to be coming over the next 5 years in gaming. But as I look back on it and reflect over the EA games that we've gotten this entire generation, it's almost felt like EA hasn't caught up to the disruptions that's occurred in the last 5 years, let alone future 5 years.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like they've missed the train in a lot of ways, and the times they've tried to jump on the train, they've jumped under it. And it's I don't know, like I've lost corporate trust in EA a long time ago, and just I'm a huge sports game fan. They hold a lot of the sports license. They've screwed a lot of those games over with the like Madden Ultimate Team and all that sort of stuff, not really like paying into the spirit of the rest of the game modes that other people have gotten into. But now I'm starting to lose a little bit of development faith in the studios that EA is behind, because like that EA owns, because I don't feel like really any of them have hit in a way that's gripped me. Like, and even games I was excited for, like Battlefield 1 or whatever, like, or even like Titanfall 2, you know, didn't have the staying power with me to really like get its hooks into me the way that like Call of Duty used to, or Overwatch has recently. So even if it is like, hey, we got it wrong and we can't afford to make similar mistakes, it's like, okay, it's okay to admit your mistakes, but what are you going to do in the future? And I know the purpose of this probably isn't to make announcements or whatever, but I need more than just, we got it wrong. Like, how are you going to get it right?
Yeah.
So, we'll see. Out of all of the E3 presentations, I think I'm most fascinated by what EA is going to do. I'm interested in what all of them have to do, obviously. And I think Microsoft's is going to be important too, but EA to me, like, I feel like they've got to hit it out of the park.
Yeah.
Not to survive or anything. They got a freaking war chest of money they're sitting on.
Yeah.
All right, next item on the list, Larry. Quantic Dreams is suing a French media outlet over negative reportings about toxic work conditions. This is from Jason Schreier over on Kotaku. This story is fresh, published today at 10 a.m. Story reads, last week, Quantic Dream founder and CEO David Cage flew to New York City to show demos of his dramatic new PS4 game, Detroit Become Human, to press in his home city of Paris. Meanwhile, a different type of drama was unfolding. French journalists were defending themselves against Cage's legal charges. Quantic Dream has sued the French newspaper Le Monde and the website Mediapart for reports on the studio's working conditions, Kotaku has learned. As far as we can tell, this is the first incident of a video game studio taking legal action against the press for negative reporting. Cage and co-CEO Guillaume de Fondemiere, some sort of French word, Larry, had threatened litigation in January when the reports hit, but some observers assumed that that was posturing. It wasn't, as both Cage and the media outlets have confirmed to Kotaku. And then this part of the story is really interesting. We learned about this unusual lawsuit in an unusual fashion. I happened to be in Paris last week, and this is Jason Schreier, doing press for the upcoming French version of my first book, Blood, Sweat, and Pixels. You gotta get that that plug in there. I'm also stalling because Larry's peeing right now. At one point, I was scheduled to meet with Le Monde journalist William Ardereau, whose name I remembered from an explosive article in January reporting allegations of sexist jokes, extensive crunch, and racist comments at Quantic Dream. Quantic Dream denied the report. I was looking forward to talking to him, but on Wednesday, my publisher told me that he was going to have to reschedule, quote, he's caught up in court, end quote, they said. Court? I asked, trying to put the pieces together. Does this have something to do with Quantic Dream? My publisher didn't know the answer, but Kotaku senior reporter Cecilia D'Anastasio had a preview appointment for Detroit in New York City on Thursday. Cage would be there. When she asked him what happened after the Le Monde article came out, Sony's PR handler shut questions down, but not before Cage let one piece of information slip. Quote, we're suing their journalist, end quote, he said. The story continues. Then I spoke to William Ardeau, who confirmed that he was dealing with paperwork last week for this lawsuit, but did not want to elaborate given the ongoing litigation. Quote, the story has been written sincerely, following a well-documented, thorough investigation, respectful of the principle that both sides must be heard. We stick with our information, end quote. This was according to a private message from Ardeau. So, Larry,
yes.
I take it you read the story.
I did.
All right.
I've been waiting for this story
All right,
for
great.
so long, and I could take a bathroom break.
All right. Thoughts on this?
Wow.
Wow.
I mean, it's a pretty crazy story. I don't know enough about either side to like pick a side or anything, but
and I don't think it's our place to speculate.
Yeah. But if you're gonna sue a bunch of journalists, you better be dang sure that none of this stuff was going on in your company.
That's the thing. You either have to be really sure or really arrogant that you can lie.
Yeah.
And this is one of those things like, so Detroit is a game that I'm very excited about. I remember when this story came out back in January, and I was like, man, if that's true, like, I don't know if that's something I really want to pay for and get behind, you know, like if this is the environment that they're creating. But then if like they go to sue and it comes back out that like, no, they didn't, you know, they covered their bases. Like this is all true. Like that's an absolute nah, dog, I'm out. Like,
yeah.
And I agree with you. Like if you're going to go after journalists, you better have your stuff together. But also if you're going to do this and like with a game about to come out and like you're going to put your entire company under the microscope, like you better be sure that there's not going to be any dirt able to be dug up or whatever. Like, so this story's fascinating to me, and not in a great way. Like,
Yeah.
I think it's a bad look, you know, and, you know, to some extent we kind of talked about this when like PUBG was talking about suing Fortnite or whatever. And like the aggressor in any litigation, when it comes to like, when it comes to things of this nature, where like the aggressor's trying to also sell me a product at the time,
Yeah.
it just doesn't come off great. I'd love to know like what Sony's feeling about this. You know, Detroit Become Human is being published by them. I think Quantic Dreams is, I'm almost positive they're a first party studio. I'm gonna look that up real quick. But like, you know, is Sony backing this lawsuit as well? Are they encouraging like, hey, you know, this, we visited your studio, we know this stuff's untrue? Like, I don't know. The story is interesting. I'm interested to see how it plays out. And I don't know what the nature of like French media is or whatever, but the story will be interesting to see how it plays out. That's all I really have to say about it. So
Yeah.
next item on the list, Larry. Did you check out this this little thing from about Games Pass? This is from
I did.
WCCF Tech. I thought this was interesting. I encourage you to go read this entire article. It's called Spencer, Response to Xbox One X Impacting Future Plans, talks photorealism, multi-gen support, XGP. Was there anything else? Did you read the whole article or just that end that I told you about?
I skimmed the article and focused on the end.
Okay. Because I was going to just see if there was anything else in it that you wanted to mention. But I thought this part was very fascinating. So somebody tweeted it, Phil Spencer, friend of the show.
Phil Spencer.
Phil Spencer, friend of the show. Who's not
rules.
Who's not really a friend of the show. We just like to say he is. It says
What?
He's never been on the show, Larry. That was me calling in, pretending to be Phil Spencer.
Hi, this is Phil Spencer. I run Xbox.
I just wanted to say that we will not only be bringing Fusion Frenzy in via backwards compatibility, we will also be completely remaking it.
And it will feature the Battletoads.
So Hindle89 tweeted at Phil Spencer and said, every year a TV network commissions and launches pilots to see what will stick. If one of them is a hit, they greenlight a full series. For Games Pass, you should look to be doing the same. Launch a few tech demos and see what is worth making a full game. Phil Spencer responds, I agree that Games Pass opens up areas for experimentation that are difficult in a full-price world. We are pursuing this. Difference with TV is it's perceived as free, so viewers are kind of used to the pilot idea. People pay for Xbox Game Pass. I want to respect that.
So, unlike most tweets I read, when I read that initial tweet, I was like, that's a pretty good idea.
Wow. There are people on Twitter with good ideas.
Yes. I actually didn't understand Phil Spencer's response. I've never perceived that my TV was free.
Exactly. I mean, think about literally everything. I don't care if you cut cords. You're paying for Hulu. You're paying for Netflix. You're paying for all those services. If you don't have those, you're probably paying for cable. And even if you're just running an antenna, like you bought your TV or whatever. So I'm the same way. I've never perceived the media I consume via television as free. Yeah. Like YouTube content, I guess, or something like that. But at the end of the day, I've never viewed any of that stuff as free.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm with you. I think this is a brilliant idea. Because Xbox has a problem, a well-documented problem at this point, that it's like there's not enough games that are coming out of Microsoft Studios themselves that warrants too much discussion. And so why not use this thing that you've injected into your ecosystem to be an avenue to deliver experiences, to say, hey, we don't necessarily want to throw $60 million at this, but we're willing to throw $3 million to get a tech demo out to see if it works,
Yeah.
I don't know enough about game development to know if this would be cost beneficial. Phil Spencer, I'm going to guess, is probably a little more well-versed on that business stuff. But it's got to be cheaper to make a demo than it is to make a full game, right? I'm not crazy for thinking that.
This brings back, this could be an avenue of bringing back the era of the demo disc. You remember Xbox used to send those out?
Oh, yeah.
I loved those because they could, back then it was just a preview of a game basically, but this could serve the two functions of it gives me a preview of what's to come, and it gives them a metric of whether people are actually going to want to invest in the full product. And I think it's brilliant. I would love this on both fronts.
I feel like Xbox is doing so many interesting things with their services and with their idea of how they are going to handle their IP within their ecosystem, whether that is Xbox Game Pass or the Play Anywhere initiative, things like that. That I want to see them take more risks on the software side and use the goodwill you've created through, and not that you can do much creative through backwards compatibility, but I'm saying you've garnered a lot of goodwill because of it. That Games Pass, Play Anywhere, all of those things, use both the avenues and the goodwill to take risks on the software side. Because at this point it's what are we going to lose? We're getting, Halo 6, Forza Horizon 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've been over this before. I'm on the verge of just jumping ship to PlayStation next go around because why do I have an Xbox?
Mhm.
It's not because I have a better selection of games, that's for sure, anymore.
The reason you'll go to Xbox is because you'll be like, man, my progress from Overwatch is going to carry on to the Overwatch available on the next Xbox. I don't want to lose all that. That's the reason.
Well, if it's connected to my battle.net tag, they might do that.
Oh, that's true.
Maybe.
That's true. All right, Larry.
But
Oh, go
real, just give me this game pilot program so I can try out the Fusion Frenzy Battletoads crossover before you put out the full game.
Exactly.
I want it. The Shovel Knight 3 Battle Royale. Let me taste it.
Well, and that's what they're doing with PlayStation VR, right? Or what they did with PlayStation VR, especially during its early days. It wasn't like, hey, here's a 30-hour experience for you to play. It was, hey, here's like something you can jump in for 30 minutes and, we'll figure out what's working and what isn't, and we'll build from there. Like, that's the way. I like it. I think that's the way new ideas can be found, and it's a much cheaper route than saying, hey, 343, you go make this game with this overinflated budget and huge marketing dollars, like all that. And you start to generate a fan base of people who are just like passionate and evangelical about it, word of mouth wise, rather than, billboards. So, all right, Larry, let's move on to everybody's favorite segment. I know there's 2 other stories, but we're skipping those because they're small. The random question of the week for the month for this week. Larry,
That song doesn't make sense.
it is your random question of the week. Lay it on me, brother.
What are some of the meanest pranks you've ever played?
Larry,
Yes.
I'm a lover of all things pranks. Some may even call me a bully. So I will share with you 2 stories of epic pranks I've pulled off, both within the confines of youth ministry. So the first, I'm trying to remember if I was in youth ministry or if I was still in youth group at this point, but we went to this convention at a Bible college, and it was like a weekend deal, and it all took place on campus, and we stayed in the dorm rooms, and there was a group next to us that would not be quiet the entire night, staying up. It was like 4 a.m. They're playing Xbox. They're banging on walls. They're jumping around. And I, from a very young age, valued sleep. And so it was me, another kid in the youth group, and the youth minister staying in this dorm room. And we were just livid that night. So we developed a plan. And the plan was this. It involved a tape measure. It involved some wood and some late night sneaking around to get some things accomplished after curfew. So what we did, the doors were staggered in this hallway so you would have like a door, and then on the other side it was just a wall, and then the door on that side was like a few feet down. So what we did is we measured the distance between the jamb of the door and the wall on the other side. We went to a Home Depot, and we needed a piece of plywood and some 2x4s cut to length. Well, we pull up, it's like, this van full of kids. We all hop out, and we're all like with this youth minister. And so the guy's like, what do you guys need plywood and, these 2x4s for? So we explained our plan to him, and he's like, I'll tell you what, you guys will have to pay for the 2x4s, but I have a piece of scrap plywood in the back, and I'll give it to you. So he gives us this piece of plywood free of charge, right? We sneak out in the middle of the night to go down to the van, and we open up the trailer. We get the plywood and the 2x4s. We lay the plywood over the door jamb, and then wedge the 2x4s between the door jamb and the wall on the opposite side. So then we wait. We lie in waiting, correct? So we hear their alarm go off, and we hear the first kid like open up the door, open it, and he was half asleep, and he smacks right into the piece of plywood, right? And then we hear him go, what the crap? Because it's, youth group, and you say, what the crap?
That's right.
He's like, what the crap? And he turns around and like wakes everybody else up. Hey, somebody blockaded us into this room, yada, yada, yada. So they start like trying to shoulder charge this, this piece of plywood, and it's pushing up into the drop ceiling tiles. There's a mess everywhere. Well, 9:30 rolls around, and it's time for the first session. And rather than letting them free, we just left them in the room. When we came back, I guess like a security guard or something came back and had let them loose. But yeah, we showed them that, we're going to look. I live by a rule, Larry, and the rule is this: don't get mad, get even.
Yes.
I live by another rule above and beyond that. It is don't get mad, get even times 10. Raise the bar. But I think keeping somebody up till 4 a.m. because your youth group's just filled with a bunch of punks who like don't respect anybody else, I think blockading them in the room for a few hours is getting even. I don't think that's much above and beyond.
Yeah.
Right.
Me and my roommate Andrew at college, we did something similar. Not quite as they weren't quite as trapped. It was just more of an inconvenience. But our college decided they're going to do a thing called freshman halls. Like typically you just dropped in this hodgepodge of people, but they decided the freshmen needed their own hall, and they asked us if we would be willing to give up our rooms, and we told them no, and they said, "Oh, okay." And then that summer they took our rooms anyway and turned it into the freshman hall.
Also, Rise and Revolt says, "Yo, volume seems low." I adjusted a little bit. We messed with our mic configuration for the podcast, so appreciate the heads up.
Thank you.
Go ahead. I apologize.
So, like, we tried to befriend these freshmen, and we befriended a couple of them, but some of them were real jerks. Freshmen suck. And so, on a weekly basis, for a very long time, we would just pick a day and just stack all of the lobby furniture against the freshman hall door. So that they would come. The fastest way to get to chapel, you had to go to chapel 3 days a week. The fastest way to chapel was to come through the lobby from Second West. But we blocked that door so they'd waste their time, and freshmen are always late. So they'd run in, and they'd run into this door they couldn't open, and then have to go all the way back down there hauling around. It was just an inconvenience.
Yeah. Well, isn't that all a prank really is? You're just inconveniencing somebody.
It was an annoying, recurring inconvenience.
Okay. Real quick, this isn't my second story. This is a third story. So I worked in doing pots and pans for the school my freshman year of college, and my roommate would always go and visit his girlfriend every other weekend, who went to the college in Williamsburg. Well, every year our cafeteria would do this like survey that was like, how's the cafeteria doing or whatever. So my roommate fills out a survey writing all of these scathing things about how terrible the food is, how terrible the workers are, yada, yada, puts my name on the top. So my employer comes to me and is like, "Luke, I need to have a conversation with you. We got your review and you put your name on the top and you said some very, unsavory things about the people that you work with." And I was like, "I promise you, I did not write that. Can I see it?" And I knew immediately that it was my roommate. Well, my roommate, who went and visited his girlfriend at this college every other weekend, always got parking tickets from this thing, and it would always like set him off. He would just get livid about it. So I do one thing I'm also really good at, Larry, and that is forging documents. And I print up this this fake parking ticket and mail it to his box at school, and I give it to him, and so he gets it. He comes back into the room just angry, and he's like, "I got another ticket from my girlfriend's school, yada yada." I was like, "For real?" He's like, "Yeah, and I got to wait 2 days after getting it because it's got to go through processing before I can even take care of it." So I put in there like, "Wait 48 hours after receiving this to call." Put the number in there. Well, the number was to an equally unsavory and expensive sort of hotline. So after 2 days, he calls this unsavory hotline and then realizes what I've done. Don't get mad, get even.
I knew the first story. I did not know how you got back.
Yeah, I followed up. I also sent him a lot of pictures of like dead animals over AIM. All right, moving on to my final story, Larry. So I used to dean a week of camp with my brother. I used to dean a week of camp with you as well. My disciplinary style is what's progressive.
Can I interject before you begin your story?
Yes.
My disciplinary style is public shaming.
Right.
Embarrassment.
Yeah.
And I help train the junior counselors every year. And last year they had this guy who works in the counseling field, and he was talking to the junior counselors about like appropriate ways to deal with the kids who are acting up, and he goes on this like tirade about how you should never publicly embarrass a child as a disciplinary measure, and like I just out of the corner of my eye see all 40 junior counselor heads go and just stare at me while this dude's talking.
And it is because I was not in the room.
And I sat back straight and tall because I'm not convinced that the guy was right. What's he know?
Look, think back to your formative years, Larry.
Yeah.
The memories that stand out the most are the ones where you're embarrassed. Like when I puked in the middle of the hallway in middle school after eating a biscuit for breakfast and then walked as if I had done nothing. So if you want the lesson to stick, embarrassment is the avenue to do it through, right? All right. So camp one year, me and my brother are deaning, and during
progressive disciplinary
and my progressive disciplinary style, these two kids get brought to us who had gotten into a fight on the playground. This is like a middle school week of camp. Well, we start digging down into the bottom of it, and basically what had happened is one kid stole the other kid's hat, and the other kid responded with a late 90s insult that we had not heard in almost a decade. If you want to know about it, text Larry, and he'll let you know. His number. So we're like, look, guys, fighting is stupid. You shouldn't do this, yada, yada, yada. So the one kid doesn't learn his lesson, goes back out, tries to get into another scrap with this kid. Well, my brother and I sit back and decide, we'll let this slide for right now. We'll get back at him tonight. So it's Thursday night at camp. It's the final night. We've had our like moment at campfire. All the kids are going back to their room, and we come in and we're like, we said the kid's name. I almost said it by accident. we said the kid's name. We're like, hey man, come out with us. Look, you think fighting is such a good idea? This is what we're going to do. We let him into the gym where we had circled the entire staff, and we said, you get to pick one staff member to try to fight. If you think fighting is such a good idea, you get to pick one staff member to try to fight. So we walk him in. He picks the scrappiest looking dude in the entire circle. Like if you were going to pick somebody to fight, this is the last dude you want to pick to fight, unless you're just, you know, freaking Jean-Claude Van Damme or whatever.
Which this kid was not.
Well, this kid was not. He was tall, gangly, and like had no coordination. So we're like, all right, well, we're going to give you like 5 minutes to prepare. We're going to bring you back out. We're going to get you hyped up, yada, yada, yada. So we take him back to the dorm and we're like, look, man, he is going to fight Scrappy. You are going to have to fight Scrappy back. Here's what you do. You go into the bathroom, you run your hands under the water, you put soap. You lather your hands up with soap, but do not rinse your hands off. When the fight begins, poke him in the eye. Boom, he's got soap in the eye. He's tearing up, blah, blah, blah. We're like, all right, go back. So he comes out. He's got soap down to the elbow. He looked like he's about to go into surgery. So we're like, all right, go into the gym, wait a minute, and we'll be right there. But while he was doing all of this, we had snuck the entire staff out of the gym and turned all the lights off. So this kid walks into the gym. He's standing there, and a couple minutes later, me and my brother bust in, and we're like, we yell his name, and we're like, what are you doing in here, man? He's like, what are you talking about? He's got soap all over his arms. He's like, what are you guys doing? And I was like, you pack your bags. You're going home tonight, man. You're not supposed to be out of the dorm after X amount of time. He's like, you guys told me to be here. And we're like, no, we didn't. Why would we tell you that? He's like, what are you talking about? So we bring him back. He's packing up his bags. He feels terrible. We get him down to the cafeteria where like kids would get picked up if their parents had to come. And we said, you see how dumb fighting is now? And I like to think he learned his lesson, you know?
So elaborate. So unnecessary.
Look, my brother and I are going to go above and beyond. The Salty says, I'm going to have to unfollow. You guys are just heinous. It was always with a purpose. You know, I never initiate. It's always to get back. And for that kid, like, what he did was stupid. And if the name he called the kid was dumb, and the fact that he went immediately out of our meeting and didn't listen to us at all was even dumber. And it was just like, sometimes the best way to learn a lesson is to have the lesson thrown directly into your face, you know, especially if they've demonstrated they're not going to listen to you to begin with. Larry, do you have any other pranks?
Yeah, this is my favorite one. You've heard this story. You've belittled this story, but I'm going to tell it anyway. So this one comes from my youth group days. The girls in our youth group were having a slumber party, and everyone was in on this prank all the guys in the youth group, all the girls in the youth group, except for 2 of the girls. It was a very large prank. But they go over, they're having their slumber party, and they tell all these scary stories, get everybody all creeped out, and the girl who lives in this house, who's hosting the slumber party, drops this story about how this dude who was in prison for murder got out on some technicality, and now he's just living on the street again. He used to abduct people. Real creepy story, but then somehow still convinces these 2 girls to go out on a walk with the group at around midnight. So their own stupidity enabled this prank. So the guys, we all got set up outside. We're all wearing dark clothing. We're wearing masks, like makeshift ninja masks, just covering everything but the eyes. This is a good way to get shot. When you're a kid, you don't think about all the things you do where you could just die.
Where you can get shot. Welcome to America.
We're sneaking through people's backyards dressed like freaking burglars. What? So we're like hiding
in West Virginia.
In West Virginia.
Also, if you're just now tuning in, this is the random question of the week. We're talking about pranks.
Yes. So these girls start going for a walk, and we're like hugging the shadows. If you stay in a slightly darker place at nighttime, people in brighter places can't see you. A lot of people don't realize how much a difference just a tiny bit of shadow makes. You can see everything from the shadow, but you can't see anything from outside the shadow. So we're playing on the shadows, and every now and then one of us will run through, and the girls will be like, "Oh, did you hear that?" And they'll freeze up. Well, eventually we do that a few times. They get to where like they think they're being followed, but they're not convinced enough of it to like really make a big deal of it. They still want to put on a brave face. And one time finally they pause, they look back, and Dizzy busts out of the shadows and runs across the street from one shadow to the other. The girls flip out. They start screaming. This woman comes out on her porch, and instead of helping, she's like, "Y'all need to shut up. My kids are trying to sleep," and like slams the door and cuts off her porch light. So they have to make their way back to their house, but we are between them and the house. So they're all huddled up, and they start like creeping by where they saw Diz go into the shadows. And the closer they get, the faster they get, and they start running. And as they run past the shadows, like 8 of us bust out of the shadows, chasing them down. And the 2 girls we're pranking are like in the back of the group. So they're getting chased down. They have no idea they're getting chased. This is horrible. It was so mean. By 8 masked figures in the dark at midnight. All the girls run into the house and slam the door shut and leave the 2 girls outside who just fall to the pavement in despair and begin to cry.
They just given up. They knew this is it. This is the end.
And then we all take our masks off, and they were very angry.
Final one. Another youth group story, but we went on this trip to this cabin, and one night me and the youth minister I was working with, because I was an intern at the time, were sleeping in this room, and these 2 girls snuck in and dumped water all over us. It was the guy's wife and one of the girls from the youth group. So again, don't get mad, get even, right? So the youth minister I was working with ticked off, and I was just like, all right, brain's already in gear. So I used my skills of document forging yet again. I inform the girl's mother, and I send a letter from the cabin, from the resort, to her house that is a bill for the 2 mattresses for like $1,400 or whatever. And I told the mom about this all beforehand. So the mom comes up to me after church one day and is like, "Luke, can you explain to me why we got a $1,400 bill in the mail?" I was like, "Oh yeah, I meant to talk to you about that because I figured they'd be sending it. We left you guys' address at the desk. But your daughter dumped like gallons of water over 2 of the mattresses and ruined them. So the hotel's going to have to replace them." And the daughter's standing there. She was like, "Did you do this to them? Did you ruin 2 mattresses?" And she was like, It was just a joke. She's like, "Just a joke? You got to start thinking. I know you had volleyball planned. I know you were going to do all these camps, but you're going to have to quit all that because you're going to have to get a summer job and pay for this stuff." And she let her like go a couple days apparently, thinking that she was going to have to quit all of her fun summer activities before finally revealing to her that no, this was all just a trick, but you probably shouldn't do something stupid over that expensive of merchandise, like spilling gallons of water on mattresses. Anyway, I love pranking people, Larry.
We've got more, but we'll share them as they come up organically.
Yeah. So let's get out of here, Larry. Who are you?
I'm Larry. You can find me on Twitter at LairHuntsZombies, LARHUNTS Zombies.
And I'm Luke Croft. You can find me on Twitter at TK from Antioch. You can find us, the Player 3 Podcast, over here every Monday on twitch.tv/Player3 Podcast, iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, youtube.com/Player3 Podcast, wherever you're listening to us. Thank you. Like, subscribe, comment, review, all of those sorts of things. And then tonight, probably streaming some Overwatch, so hop on over to check us out there. Until next time,
We're getting good.
we love you. We are the Player 3 Podcast. Player 3 Podcast! P3P.